Hello and welcome to Beyond the Box Score. I am your host, Cameron Sadeghi, and we have a special guest joining us, Craig Sager Jr. You may have noticed him from the piece. TNT did a great, excellent piece. Ernie Johnson interviewed Craig and his family, and Craig joins us now. Craig, before we get going about the college athlete stuff, what was that experience like to be interviewed by Ernie Johnson?
It was pretty cool. I think the coolest part of it though was my dad went first, and we talked a little bit about just the whole situation, but I hadn't heard it yet from his perspective. So the clip they showed was only 18 minutes, but I think they talked for a good 2 hours. And I just heard the whole thing and then sat down. So it was cool to kind of hear my dad's perspective first, and then Ernie's a guy I've known my entire life. So just a great, great guy. And I wouldn't have wanted to do the sit down with anyone else.
Yeah, Ernie, he came on to this show as well. He's definitely a great human being and definitely a great broadcaster. So this was the main topic we were going to talk about, whether or not college athletes should get paid. So I put the simple question out to you. Do college athletes deserve to get paid?
Do they deserve it? Yes. I absolutely think they deserve some sort of compensation. At the same time, I think strict guidelines do need to be in place because you can't have entourages coming around, moving into Athens, Georgia when the big star gets there and making money after practice. You can't do that. So some of the ideas, which I don't think there's necessarily one right answer. There's going to be pros and cons to everything. But just in my experience, I think if you gave them something comparable to minimum wage, where every person on that team gets the same amount of money. I think when you look at the pros, you see guys go to the pros, and as soon as they get that first paycheck, a majority of them don't really know how to spend it. But if you just have that money that you know you earned, you kind of look back at, okay, well, this is how many hours. At the same time, you can follow NCAA regulations and keep the hours on tab that way. But if you just had a check for the work you did, I feel like it just promotes better spending habits. It just gives you that little extra cash, and you can still pay athletes and make it a team type thing. Like, just because you're Todd Gurley, you don't make 10 times more than this person. So I think, minimum wage, they'd be showing a lot of cash because they're putting in some serious hours with 110 guys a day, but just in some sort of consistent small payment where you can track the hours, I think that could possibly help them just with their spending habits later on.
A lot of people have said, college athletes do not have that much power when it comes to discussing social issues, or, they don't really have a lot of say when it comes to big issues. Do you think paying players would empower them?
Absolutely, and I think that's the problem. I think when you get money involved, it's just, you can't have a guy going to class if he's already making thousands of dollars. It's just, that's a recipe for disaster. These kids are in for school. I think it's something you sign up for. You make this amount of money just like everyone else. I think it's got to be an even playing field. This school doesn't make more than that school. To make everyone happy, there's still going to be the pros and cons. You still have to set the guidelines and keep it, but you can't give that much power to them. But there needs to be more power in the student athlete because just everything I've seen, you really aren't allowed to do anything. Johnny Manziel was a little different. He got away with a lot. But, just when I was at Georgia, no. They're going to make sure you don't say anything stupid. They're going to talk to you before the interview, let you know what you can and cannot say. If you're at a FCA function and let's say you're Islamic or Jewish, you're probably still going to go to it just because you don't want to be that guy that causes a scene. They don't want any trouble well, it's just one of those things where you really don't have any power. You're just basically do everything in the university's image. And I don't like that, but I do not think you can just open it up and let these guys hustle as much money as they can.
You mentioned Manziel. Do you think athletes who generate more money for the NCAA, should there be incentives, or is this straight up every sport, every athlete gets the same amount?
I know I said that there needs to be a base, but honestly, endorsements and stuff, I think there's a way to regulate that. There's contracts set in place. You make sure it's set in stone. No one's getting screwed over and all that. I mean, I think just in terms of the jersey sales, that's going to be something that's tough to negotiate because how are you going to... It's just so easy to sell a jersey and make money for it. And who's going to get the money once you open it up? And people say, well, yeah, the university's making all the money. Well, if they hand it over to the players, then who's making all the money? It's not going to be, all that money being sold off that student is not going in his hands. It's going in other people's hands, and they're selling it for him. So as much as it looks like Johnny Manziel would make all that money off his jerseys, it's not like he has the Johnny Manziel store where he's shipping them in, putting them on the rack, and pocketing on the cash. Someone else is making money off them. So I think you really got to look at who do you want. Do you want the universities and NCAA pocketing that money, or do you want the autograph brokers, maybe some of the entourage people and all that making the money?
Is it fair for whether it's media or fans to criticize college athletes for not standing up to this, or are they so powerless that even if they did stand up to this, it wouldn't work?
They're absolutely powerless because it's just one of those things. You sign up, you go to the school, and that's the way it is. You're going to be in the weight room, and they're going to bring around the NCAA checklist while you're working out, usually after you've watched film, after you've gone through a walkthrough, and they're going to make you sign off for, hey, did you guys practice for 40 hours or less? And, I mean, what are you going to do, say no? So you're kind of just going to sign off on those things. I mean, there's other things where you can't really stand up and say things. Can never criticize coaching staffs. I mean, you can't get away with those things in college, and that's tough. And people do need to start thinking about what you're saying, giving these colleges just a little more voice, because it will help them out in the long run. I mean, they've got to learn some of these skills and just be in the perfect mold, listen to everything they say, and stand up and just basically reading what the coaches want you to say is not going to help these guys later on.
How would you limit the coach's power?
Football's an interesting game. Just for example, that Central Michigan game, I think that's a perfect example of there's coaches on not every team, but there's coaches on teams that have bigger egos than the players. And I don't think you can. Coach is always going to, at the same time, the coach is a bigger figure than the player. I don't care what kind of star you are, that coach is in charge. And there's a lot of high-name coaches out there, and there's no possible way. I don't care how good you are at Alabama. You aren't going to be able to have more power than Nick Saban. I don't care how good you are at Georgia. I mean, Mark Richt's been there. He's a figure everyone has known and learned to respect. A player's not going to be able to take that voice. So I think there's a way to stand up and maybe think of things just long-term and break them down and have a voice, but not necessarily just disrupt the order and be the Johnny Manziel controversy, all that. I mean, I think you can talk about it like a professional and throw around these ideas and even sit down. I mean, like when I was at Georgia, Coach Rick, there's nothing a player couldn't go up to him and say. If he wanted to talk about it and maybe get a perspective from him, he would have sat down and talked about it. So I guess you just challenge the athletes to learn how to talk to these people, because a lot of them have the power and they're around a lot of people that can kind of weigh the issues with them, talk about the pros and cons, explain how it works, because a lot of the things the student athletes don't really know how it works. You don't know where the money goes. You don't know where all that stuff is happening. You just sign a paper, show up to class, and go to practice. You don't really ask questions. So I think that's the way they kind of want it. But I think players need to just start taking it to issue and maybe talking to coaches, talking to people at the athletic department, kind of learning more about the issue, because you can't just come out and say, hey, we need to make more money. You guys are selling my jerseys. You're going to have to say, well, here's where this percent goes, and this person makes this much off me. The university pockets this, and if you have the facts to back up what you're saying, you can come out and say that stuff. But just saying pay us, that's not ever going to work. And so these student athletes need to do their homework, do their research, and come up with a solution if that's really what they want.
Where do you think the majority of the media, where do you think they side on this issue?
I think the majority of the people think that college athletes should get paid these days. And I think the majority of people especially don't like the punishments handed down when someone gets suspended for selling their own jersey, or someone, I mean, the tattoo thing with Ohio State was a little ridiculous, but just the same thing. I mean, people do it. In the real world, this happens all the time. I mean, people have connections. They slip around. They take advantage of the situation. I mean, to act like someone selling a jersey is just, it's not against the law, and it's hard to explain to them, hey, you aren't allowed to do this. And even though they know it's against the rules, you have these autograph brokers that will come up to them and say, hey, everyone's making all this money off you. Like, I can sell this for $200. I can give you $50 of it every time, because the jersey costs this much, and blah, blah, blah. And it makes sense to the player. And these autograph brokers trick them into it, and it doesn't seem like they're doing anything wrong. They know it's against the rules. They know they're breaking it, but it's happening in front of them. They're seeing it explained to them. They're meeting the guy selling it, and it really isn't illegal, and it doesn't look wrong from that perspective. And it's just more of a rule thing that they're going to have to understand.
Do you think that Mark Emmert will ever be, will anyone ever limit the power of Mark Emmert?
I think we're going to start seeing that. I think we're going to see more power within the conferences to make their own rules, which is going to bring probably light to a new era of college athletics. Just rules changes. Maybe agents can, I mean, especially in recruiting, I think we're going to see a lot of changes in how people recruit these days. And I think paying college athletes, I think it's an issue right now. I don't think it's the biggest issue. I think there's other problems in the NCAA right now. And just what you mentioned earlier, I think the lack of power for the players is more concerning, because they can get their education, which is what they say is their way of getting paid. But if you don't teach these kids how to understand what they're getting, and kind of break it down for them and help them through the experience, it's just going to look like they're getting dipped off. And I just think the biggest problem with the whole thing is, where's this money going? I mean, I'm up at the Georgia Dome right now. I'm looking at the Chick-fil-A Bowl is going to be here next week. I mean, Ole Miss comes to practice. They've got their huge semis, their coach buses. They've got the graphics all over the windows on the bus. They've got the stainless steel hubcaps. I mean, this is nice stuff. They're surrounded by nice stuff. You look at the Oregon team locker room, their facilities, it's also nice, and to see how nice it is, and to